Oh, if women could only form such friendships! Oh, you happy, happy men!" Her voice faltered, and her convenient teacup absorbed her for the third time. "I would give all the little beauty I possess," she said, "if I could only find such a friend as Mr. Armadale has found in you. I never shall, Mr. Midwinter. I never shall. Let us go back to what we were talking about. I can only tell you how your friend is concerned in my misfortune by telling you something first about myself. I am like many other governesses. I am the victim of sad domestic circumstances. It may be weak of me, but I have a horror of alluding to them among strangers. My silence about my family and my friends exposes me to misinterpretation in my dependent position. Does it do me any harm, Mr. Midwinter, in your estimation?" "God forbid," said Midwinter, fervently. "There is no man living," he went on, thinking of his own family story, "who has better reason to understand and respect your silence than I have." Miss Gwilt seized his hand impulsively. "Oh," she said, "I knew it! The first moment I saw you, I knew that you too had suffered, that you too had sorrows which you kept sacred. Strange, strange sympathy! I believe in mesmerism. Do you?" She suddenly recollected herself and shuddered. "Oh, what have I done? What must you think of me?" she exclaimed, as he yielded to the magnetic fascination of her touch, and, forgetting everything but the hand that lay warm in his own, bent over it and kissed it. "Spare me," she said faintly, as she felt the burning touch of his lips. "I am so friendless. I am so completely at your mercy." He turned away from her, and hid his face in his hands. He was trembling, and she saw it. She looked at him while his face was hidden from her. She looked at him with a furtive interest and surprise. "How that man loves me!" she thought. "I wonder whether there was a time when I might have loved him." The silence between them remained unbroken for some minutes. He had felt her appeal to his consideration as she had never expected or intended him to feel it. He shrank from looking at her or from speaking to her again. "Shall I go on with my story?" she asked. "Shall we forget and forgive on both sides?" A woman's inveterate indulgence for every expression of a man's admiration, which keeps within the limits of personal respect, curved her lips gently into a charming smile. She looked down meditatively at her dress, and brushed a crumb off her lap with a little flattering sigh. "I was telling you," she went on, "of my reluctance to speak to strangers of my sad family story. It was in that way, as I afterward found out, that I laid myself open to Miss Milroy's malice and Miss Milroy's suspicion. Private inquiries about me were addressed to the lady who was my reference, at Miss Milroy's suggestion in the first instance, I have no doubt. I'm sorry to say this was not the worst of it. By some underhand means, of which I am quite ignorant, Mr. Armadale's simplicity was imposed on, and when application was made secretly to my reference in London, it was made, Mr. Midwinter, through your friend." Midwinter suddenly rose from his chair and looked at her. The fascination that she exercised over him, powerful as it was, became a suspended influence, now that the plain disclosure came plainly at last from her lips. He looked at her, sat down again, like a man bewildered, without uttering a word. "Remember how weak he is," pleaded Miss Gwilt, gently, "and make allowances for him as I do. The trifling accident of his failing to find my reference at the address given him seems, I can't imagine why, to have excited Mr. Armadale's suspicion. At any rate, he remained in London. What he did there it is impossible for me to say. I was quite in the dark. I knew nothing. I distrusted nobody. I was as happy in my little round of duties as I could be with a pupil whose affections I had failed to win, when one morning, to my indescribable astonishment, Major Milroy showed me a correspondence between Mr. Armadale and himself. He spoke to me in his wife's presence. Poor creature, I make no complaint of her. Such affliction as she suffers excuses everything. I wish I could give you some idea of the letters between Major Milroy and Mr. Armadale. But my head is only a woman's head, and I was so confused and distressed at the time. All I can tell you is that Mr. Armadale chose to preserve silence about his proceedings in London, under circumstances which made that silence a reflection on my character. The Major was most kind. His confidence in me remained unshaken, but could his confidence protect me against his wife's prejudice and his daughter's ill will? Oh, the hardness of women to each other! Oh, the humiliation if men only knew some of us as we really are! What could I do? I couldn't defend myself against mere imputations, and I couldn't remain in my situation, after a slur had been cast on me. My pride, heaven help me, I was brought up like a gentlewoman, and I have sensibilities that are not blunted even yet. My pride got the better of me, and I left my place. Don't let it distress you, Mr. Midwinter. There's a bright side to the picture. The ladies in the neighborhood have overwhelmed me with kindness. I have the prospect of getting pupils to teach. I'm spared the mortification of going back to be a burden on my friends. The only complaint I have to make is, I think, a just one. Mr. Armadale has been back at Thorpe Ambrose for some days. I have entreated him by letter to grant me an interview, to tell me what dreadful suspicions he has of me, and to let me set myself right in his estimation. Would you believe it? He has declined to see me, under the influence of others, not of his own free will, I'm sure. Cruel, isn't it? But he has even used me more cruelly still. He persists in suspecting me. It is he who is having me watched. Oh, Mr. Midwinter, don't hate me for telling you what you must know. The man you found persecuting me and frightening me tonight was only earning his money, after all, as Mr. Armadale's spy. Once more Midwinter started to his feet, and this time the thoughts that were in him found their way into words. "I can't believe it! I won't believe it!" he exclaimed indignantly. "If the man told you that, the man lied. I beg your pardon, Miss Gwilt. I beg your pardon from the bottom of my heart. Pray don't think I doubt you. I only say there is some dreadful mistake. I'm not sure that I understand as I ought all that you have told me, but this last infamous meanness of which you think Allan guilty, I do understand. I swear to you he is incapable of it. Some scoundrel has been taking advantage of him. Some scoundrel has been using his name. I'll prove it to you, if you will only give me time. Let me go and clear it up at once. I can't rest. I can't bear to think of it. I can't even enjoy the pleasure of being here. Oh," he burst out desperately, "I'm sure you feel for me, after what you have said. I feel so for you." He stopped in confusion. Miss Gwilt's eyes were looking at him again, and Miss Gwilt's hand had found its way once more into his own. "You are the most generous of living men," she said softly. "I will believe what you tell me to believe. Go," she added in a whisper, suddenly releasing his hand and turning away from him. "For both our sakes, go." His heart beat fast. He looked at her as she dropped into a chair and put her handkerchief to her eyes. For one moment he hesitated. The next, he snatched up his knapsack from the floor and left her precipitately, without a backward look or a parting word. She rose when the door closed on him. Change came over the instant she was alone. The color faded out of her cheeks, the beauty died out of her eyes. Her face hardened horribly with a silent despair. "It's even baser work than I bargained for," she said, "to deceive him." After pacing to and fro in the room for some minutes, she stopped wearily before the glass over the fireplace.